To order this November 6th, 2017 regular meeting of the Sonoma City Council. I haven't actually asked this individual yet, but Mr. Bob Leonard, would you do us the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You just step to the podium. All please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Here.
Here.
Yes.
Here. We did not have a closed session today, so at this time, can I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Item number 1 is comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. And please state your name when you begin and your address.
Michelle Ritchie, 215 East Watma, Sonoma. And first, I want to thank you for starting to work on getting more housing for low-income families and seniors. And I have my wish list for you today. I would like to encourage you to get the Nexus study completed. Let's hit up the tourist industry for as much as possible by increasing their tax so that could help us finance low-cost housing. And I would like also for you to support the Saha project on Broadway. And I think we should also consider increasing the affordable housing inclusionary rate to 35%. And I have a newspaper article from the SF Chronicle that I would like to share with you. I have copies that I'll hand out to each one of you. I do want to point out some things and suggest that we might considering doing the same thing. The article is about what Vancouver city officials are doing to help alleviate their housing crisis. And I'm quoting from the article. In Vancouver, we hope to get ahead of the same pressures San Francisco is facing. We're taking action to limit speculative investment and put our housing stock to its best use by implementing Canada's first empty homes tax. It's a 1% annual tax on empty or underused residential properties. We are preparing an ambitious 10-year housing strategy to lay the foundation for a diverse and equitable city. It starts with the notion that supply is not the issue. We have produced lots of housing in the past decade, but rather the lack of the right supply. And it goes on to say, overall, we seek to produce over the next decade about 7,000 new homes per year, affordable to various household sizes and income levels, and not exceeding 30% of the household income on housing costs. And that's worth repeating. Not exceeding 30% of the household income on housing costs. I think we should make this be the definition of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Over on that side.
Good evening. Julia Matheson, 1396 Lubeck Street, Sonoma. I'm here representing Sonoma Patient Group. We're the oldest dispensary, medical marijuana dispensary in the county. We're located in Santa Rosa. I have an invitation for our council and for our community. We're hosting a forum at Vintage House, How Cannabis Treats Diseases, Sunday, November 19th from 3 to 5 p.m. Our featured speaker is Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather. He's a cannabis physician who practices in Sebastopol. He's the president of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, vice president of the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicines. Deborah Caldwell will also be there talking about how topicals can alleviate pain and inflammation in the body. Sarah Schrader will also be there. She's with Americans for Safe Access, a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring safe and legal access to cannabis. She'll be there to answer any legal questions our community might have. This is an educational forum, not sponsored nor endorsed by Vintage House. If you have any more questions or any concerns, please give me a call at area code 707-480-5639 or jewel@vom.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in Sonoma. I attend the Sunday meetings of the Spiritual Action Group here in Sonoma at the Methodist Church. And it's my feeling that we need to get back to some of the issues that are important to our group. Rent control, just cause evictions, the, for lack of a better word, ripping folks off by raising their rents. These are issues that are alive and happen every day in Sonoma. I know some of you have had personal experience with these issues. So please, now's the time. There is a positive side to the whole fire business, and we need to get practical and start working on leveling the playing field for folks in affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Silver, 95 Bernhardt Avenue, Sonoma, in the Springs. Greetings and salutations, council members. I did a little research and found that the task before each of you, elected individually and collectively, must be daunting. 10,000 is a huge number, whether it's pieces of bubble gum or dollars or grains of sand. And were it to take the population of the city that you serve and divide them equally, each of you would be in a room with over 2,000 people. They look to you each day, and they go to sleep each night, hoping that you will make decisions that improve the quality of their life, be they someone who's a long-term resident or someone new to the valley like myself, or people looking to come here. I know that that can be an overwhelming challenge. There are many sides to the issues presented to you. And on your plate tonight, aside from Rachel's woeful peanut butter and jelly sandwich that she showed me, someone really needs to get that taken care of. It must be ponderous for you to think of making a decision that could impact some people that you know and others that you don't in a way that would be different than you would like for yourself. But having said that, for two of you, the ladies in particular, I've met your parents and they're charming individuals, and I am in a similar age group to them. Fortunately, we all seem to be a fine fiddle and in good mental and physical health. I hope tonight that you will decide not to postpone yet again the 3 moratoria, that troika of indecision, and at least put it off for a short period of time. And there's 6 people I'd like you to go talk with. The police chief of Santa Rosa, the principal of the high school, the mayor, and the bank that Jules' company uses. For over a decade, they have dealt with all the decisions that you ponder. Please do not put this off any further. I think it's important for all of us and each of you sitting at table. So, in your decision-making tonight, make a decision, and maybe make a decision that will impact those now and in your future here in this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, could I remind the public that the last couple of people spoke about something that was on the agenda this evening? So I'd just like to remind people of that.
Do we have any further public comment on this time? It's, do we, do we have any further public comment on this time? All right, seeing none, I will bring it back. At this time, do we have any meeting dedications?
I have a couple.
Ms.
Thank you.
Agramonte.
This evening, I'd like to dedicate in 2 names.
your microphone? I can't hear you, please.
Well, I have it on. What?
Am I the only one?
Let's not have shouting from the audience.
If those on the dais and in the audience could please wait until you're recognized to speak, Ms. Agramonte.
So I would like to dedicate this council meeting this evening to Barbara Angela Keneally Leadham, passed away October 22nd, 2017. She was married to Mike Leadham in 1991. Together they dedicated their lives as drug and alcohol rehabilitation counselors. Barbara is predeceased by her parents, her loving son, Sammy Sebastiani, her devoted husband, Mike Leadham, and her younger brother, Jack Keneally. She is survived by her daughters, Moira Kelly, Lisa Mertens, and her youngest son, Joey Sebastiani. She is also survived by many grandchildren and nieces and nephews. That's Barbara Angela Keneally Leadham. Thank you. I would also like to dedicate this evening's council meeting to John George Berger. Of course, he was the husband to Evelyn Berger, whom I think between the two of them were a wonderful team here in Sonoma. And he is survived by John and Ellison, Chris and Rhonda, Mike and Rosie, and Robert and Courtney. And he is also survived by many nieces and nephews and grandchildren. And that's John George Berger. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other dedications at this time? And I would like to add a dedication to the 26 people at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas yesterday who were quite tragically murdered. And I also want to send my thoughts and prayers to their friends and family. All right, at this time we have a couple presentations. First up, item 3.1 is a proclamation in honor of Veterans Day 2017. And I am not sure who will be receiving this proclamation today. I know there's a few eligible people in the room. A proclamation in honor of Veterans Day 2017. Whereas the men and women who have and currently are serving in the armed forces of the United States of America have made major contributions toward the preservation of this nation and its people. And whereas the services performed by these millions of gallant Americans have demonstrated the willingness of our nation to meet the challenges of those forces wishing to subjugate individual determination through armed conflict. And whereas honorable service performed in the defense of our nation in time of war is the highest form of citizenship, and whereas the Congress of the United States of America has designated the 11th day of November each year as Veterans Day, and whereas the nation and the free world are eternally grateful for the contributions of American veterans, men and women, to the advancement of the cause of an honorable world peace. And whereas on this Veterans Day, we honor the heroes we have lost, and we rededicate ourselves to the next generation of veterans by supporting our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen as they return home from duty. As we reflect upon the invaluable contributions of our country's veterans, may we reaffirm our commitment to provide them and their families with the essential support they were promised and have earned. And whereas, as grateful Americans, we open our arms to embrace veterans returning home, with humble hearts, we offer them our gratitude, respect, and appreciation for their service. We welcome them home and stand proudly at their side to lend a hand as they resume their civilian life. We thank them for answering our country's call and for keeping our families safe. Now, therefore, I, Rachel Hunley, Mayor of the City of Sonoma, do hereby call upon all citizens to observe Veterans Day, November 11th, 2017, with appropriate ceremonies in honor of those who have served and are serving to preserve the principles of justice, freedom, and democracy. And Mr. Lean, do you have a few words you want to say, maybe about Saturday? Well, you'll be up next for the next one, too. So, Mr. Lean. Thank you. And we have one more, and it is for Freedom Week Sonoma, and I know that there are a few people to join me for this one.
Come on.
A proclamation for Freedom Week Sonoma. Whereas Freedom Day USA is a national thank you movement for our active duty armed forces and their immediate families, our military reserves, the National Guard, and the veterans of our armed forces. It was founded by a West Virginia dentist named Robert Martino, DDS, and the members of the Platinum Circle, a group of elite dentists who practice throughout our country. And whereas Mr. Martino's vision was to give the members of our military and veterans a day of tangible gratitude where we thank them beyond lip service for giving us our freedom, but by providing free services, goods, products, etc., as a thank you for the sacrifice, service, and freedom from these men and women who have provided to us. And whereas the initial Freedom Day USA event in Sonoma was held on September 12th, 2013, with the help of Kimberly Hubinet, also a dentist, owner of Synergy Dental Group, and a member of the Platinum Circle. She expanded the concept locally beyond dentistry to include 20 other participating businesses. During the second Freedom Day USA in 2014, the Rotary Club of Sonoma Valley became the first official community sponsor and established it as an annual event. That same year, they doubled the number of participating local businesses. During the third year, in 2015, the event was expanded beyond the single-day concept to take place over several days and was locally renamed Freedom Week Sonoma, becoming an extension of Freedom Day USA. In 2016, the concept was expanded to also thank our local law enforcement officers and firefighters, along with our military. The number of participating businesses doubled again that year to approximately 80. Whereas in 2017, the event was moved to November 8th through 12th, so that it would fall within the same week as Veterans Day on November 11th. The following organizations also officially endorsed this event by becoming co-sponsors: Rotary Club of Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau, Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce, Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers Alliance, Sonoma Valley Firefighters Association, Shell Vista Firefighters Association, Sonoma County Deputy Sheriff's Association, AMVETS Hap Arnold Post number 55, American Legion Jack London Post number 489, Veterans of Foreign War Bear Flag Post 1943, and Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary Sonoma. And whereas in 2017, there's a special added emphasis on honoring the firefighters, law enforcement officers, and the National Guard who saved the city of Sonoma from the recent wildfires. This event is also being integrated with the City of Sonoma's other upcoming appreciation events to honor the heroic role that all of our first responders played in battling the recent wildfires. Now, therefore, I, Rachel Hundley, Mayor of the City of Sonoma, do hereby proclaim November 8th through 12th, 2017, Freedom Week Sonoma in the City of Sonoma, and take this opportunity to thank the active duty members of our armed forces, their immediate families, our military reserves, the National Guard, the veterans of our armed forces, and our law enforcement officers, firefighters, and all other first responders for their service. I also thank Dr. Kimberly Hubinet and the Rotary Club of Sonoma Valley for their initial grassroots efforts to launch this worthy local annual cause, to all of this event's current co-sponsor organizations for stepping up. And I have 4 copies for you, so don't go away just yet.
All right, here first. 1, 2, 3. Great. Here second. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
A couple years ago, when we added first responders to this event, we did so because we appreciated them keeping us safe every day in our local community, but we also knew that during the war and global terrorism, the front lines could be East 1st Street West or Napa Street, not Iraq and Afghanistan. By the time the military ever showed up if something happened here, we had a feeling that a few firefighters and police officers would be fully engaged protecting our freedom locally. We never thought in a million years that an enemy would be something other than a combative human being. It would be a fire. And so we are deeply thankful for our firefighters and our police officers. Thank you.
Thank you all. Item number 4 is our consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. Does anyone wish to remove our item? Oh, wait, why don't we have this? Oh, I guess we have to. All right, probably not. So at this time, we're going to go out to the public for public comments. Seeing none, I'll bring it back for an action.
I'd like to move to waive further reading and authorize introduction and/or adoption of ordinances by title only.
I'll second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. Item 5.1. We have a few things on the list. Consider and possibly adopt an extension of an interim urgency ordinance imposing a moratorium on the outdoor cultivation of non-medical cannabis, ratifying issuance of Government Code Section 65858D, report and making findings that said adoption is exempt under CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines Section 15061, among other provisions. And you will see on your agenda there are also 2, alternatively 3 other things we'll be discussing. And I believe at this point we're going to begin with our city manager, or we will begin with our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Back in November of last year and December of last year, the council adopted and extended 2 moratoria ordinances dealing with recreational cannabis. These ordinances were adopted in anticipation of the passage of Proposition 64, which legalized recreational use of marijuana in the state of California. These were temporary moratoria, and the first one expired in 45 days. The council extended that 10 months and 15 days, which sets an expiration time of midnight tonight on the 2 ordinances dealing with recreational cultivation of cannabis. These ordinances banned outdoor cultivation of recreational cannabis, allowed the indoor cultivation up to 6 plants per residence. Those 2 ordinances are before you tonight for a final extension to November of next year. No more extensions are permitted. Staff is recommending adoption of these extension ordinances to give the city time to adopt whatever regulations, prohibitions, standards, fees, taxes that the council might deem appropriate for cannabis businesses in the city, as well as to create a comprehensive regulatory scheme for cultivation, for personal and commercial use of both medicinal and recreational cannabis. The 2 ordinances that are expiring tonight deal only with recreational use, recreational cultivation of cannabis. Also before you tonight is a new moratorium that would impose similar restrictions, actually identical restrictions on medicinal cannabis cultivation, i.e. it would outlaw outdoors cultivation of medicinal cannabis, allow indoor cultivation up to 6 plants. So the total number of indoor plants that could be cultivated is 6, whether it be for medicinal or recreational purposes. That would be the net effect of adopting the ordinance that's before you tonight that would start tonight if it were adopted. That same ordinance also bans commercial cannabis activities. 2 ordinances are before you. 2 options are before you tonight for this new ordinance. Again, the first 2 I discussed are extending existing moratoria. The third is a new moratorium that addresses medicinal cannabis cultivation and commercial cannabis businesses. There are 2 options for you tonight regarding the commercial cannabis issue. One is to ban all commercial cannabis activities in the city for a temporary period of 45 days, extendable within that 45-day period for another 10 months and 15 days. The other option is to ban commercial cannabis activities, but to carve out an exception to permit deliveries of medicinal cannabis to qualified patients and primary caregivers within the city from out-of-city businesses, subject to a couple of conditions. One, the out-of-city business must obtain a business license tax and pay the appropriate license fee. Number 2, they cannot use marked vehicles that would identify the vehicles, if they're using vehicles to deliver medicinal cannabis, as a delivery vehicle. And 3, the deliveries would occur basically during the day from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. in the evening, giving and striking a reasonable balance between the needs of the users of medicinal cannabis. Gives them 16 hours to order their medicinal and receive their medicinal cannabis. And that's the purpose, one of the purposes for imposing those conditions. The ordinance also expressly states that the exemptions for the deliveries will last only as long as the ordinances themselves, thus giving the city council, once they expire, the right to adopt legislation and comprehensive regulations for such delivery services if you wish to continue them. Again, these ordinances are to buy time. We've heard tonight an open comment. We've heard before the council should not adopt these, should do other things. It's unclear exactly what the other things might be. We do know we have less than 2 months before the state will begin issuing licenses for cannabis businesses. And if the council does nothing, then we are left with a scramble. And we would need to get direction from the council as to what you want to have happen. We'd attempt to adopt regulations in a very short period of time. The amount of community input would be abbreviated. We have holidays coming up. So it'd be a very difficult task to do nothing and then try to scramble and produce something that the council may think is appropriate in less than 2 months. We are urging the council to extend the existing ordinances and adopt the new ordinance exempting deliveries of medicinal cannabis. The council has expressed some concern in the past over qualified patients and primary caregivers' needs for medical cannabis to address medical issues, and this ordinance addresses those on a temporary basis. I'm open to any kind of questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Ms. Harrington?
So, I'm trying to get my mind around, this is not a comment, it's actually a question, how nothing happened over the entire last year, that we're back at a crisis again, where it has to be done because there's no time. And so was the proper thing that should have been done, that the Planning Commission should have considered this in the last year? I mean, a whole year has gone by. Who was the appropriate body to start working on some of this stuff? I'd just like to know what the procedure was thought that it would have been.
Kathy, you have some thoughts on that?
Well, in years past, the Planning Commission actually did do a lot of work on a cannabis ordinance, but the council ultimately chose not to adopt it. And in this go-around, it was felt that it was best to get some clear direction from the city council before attempting to bring anything through the Planning Commission. So in order to do that, we spent a good part of last summer developing a lot of research on the current and pending regulations that were being developed by other communities in Sonoma County, in Marin County, and in Napa County. And we tried to bring that information together for the city council in a study session that was held in September of this year. And based on that, that study session was intended to be kind of the starting point to get more detailed direction from the city council in terms of the kinds of policies that you wanted to implement. And you know, events intervened that prevented us from returning to the council in a timely way. And I certainly apologize for that. But based on the research that we've done, based on the study session that we've had, I think that we are in a pretty good position now to come back to the council relatively quickly to get your policy direction. But probably it would be best, as the city attorney has suggested, that we not try to just cram that into a 2-month period.
So the next steps, I'm just asking about the procedure here. So the next steps that you envision is, even though we had a study session, there was a straw poll, that somehow you're going to come back to this city council for additional direction and then go to the Planning Commission? Or the next step is, we had the study session, we had a straw poll, and you will now go to the Planning Commission? What is the next step?
Well, unless I'm contradicted by the city manager, I believe that our next step is to return to the city council. The direction, well, I think that as part of that study session, we didn't attempt to get consensus direction from the council. I think we heard, you know, the views of individual council members. But, and so we do need to go back to the city council to get direction on the narrowed down issues that remain.
That's correct. I mean, we had the study session, and that really was a study session to educate council, and each of you gave some perspective at the end of that, but we were not asking for a vote, we weren't asking for direction, and it really was an education session. So the next step would be come back to council, lay out some options for you to give us feedback, and we get direction from the council. If the council wants us to proceed and look at doing, you know, there's a variety of kind of policy items, and depending on the pleasure of council, then we will move forward and either do additional research or move forward and take things through the planning commission.
And when is that meeting scheduled?
The meeting's not scheduled before the end of the year. Based on the fire, there were a variety of activities that we've hit and that have hit us. So I do think this is probably looking at more of a January, February timeline to kind of put that together and bring it. I mean, that's my thought at this point, that we could schedule that kind of direction conversation for council in early 2018.
Any further questions at this time? Seeing none, I will take it out to the public for public comment. And just remember, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and tell us your name and your address first.
How are you doing? My name is John Early, 1100 Castle Road, for the past 38 years, and Sonoma since 1976 with my wife, Jackie. I have read every page of the agenda. I think there were 66 some odd reference pages, and made notes and consulted with my attorney, Erin Karlstrom, who was going to be here tonight to present, but she got called to another event, so she's being represented by her associate. What I wanted to comment on was some what I consider to be strange entries into these recommendations. The main one that really caught my eye and is repeated many times in this set of options is that at best the moratorium is to remain in place with the exception of delivery by, get this, outside entities that want to come into Sonoma and do business, but not businesses from Sonoma. That's my interpretation. And so I find that to be really difficult to understand because, first of all, I'm going to come out of the closet. For the past 8 years, I've been in this industry. My focus has been cannabis. I do operate in the city of Sonoma, and I have been for many years. I've been paying taxes, sales tax, every single year since 2011. Of course, I'm behind closed doors, waiting for the opportunity to come out and have a viable industry, participate in this industry. We have everything in place to open our doors tomorrow for a delivery service or a dispensary. And what I find to be is that I don't understand why the city would explicitly support non-local businesses. And what's the policy behind that? Sonoma County does exactly the opposite. And it offers preference to local businesses and people that have been in business, as I have, since prior to January 1st, 2016. So I just feel it's incredibly important to support local businesses. And my story, as I expressed, there's a lot to it. I've got a complete experience in this industry and would like to put it to good use for the local citizens. And don't ever forget that Patriots and Redcoats and Bear Flag Revolt are all part of our history. And
Thank you very much. Thank you.
keep it in mind that we have good intentions.
Mayor Hunley and honorable council members, my name is Louise Mercier. I am a young associate at Dickinson, Pinman and Fogarty, a law firm located in downtown Napa, and I'm now speaking on behalf of our clients. Thank you, as always, for your service to the community and your thoughtful consideration of issues relating to commercial cannabis industry. Many jurisdictions are acting quickly to implement cannabis businesses, including Santa Rosa, Cloverdale, and Mendocino County. These jurisdictions have recognized that the adult use market will generate much needed sales tax and help bolster job creation. At your council last consideration on the issue, we offer public comment addressing some of the issues raised by the Muni Service presentation in our draft ordinance. A few additional considerations include the following. Rather than relying on moratoria, we request that the council please act swiftly to adopt meaningful regulation. If the council does indeed extend the moratorium on commercial cannabis activity, we encourage you to impose a time certain for the expiration of the moratoria and any associated ban. However, we request that the council denies the moratorium extension and rather adopt a robust ordinance regulating and incorporating commercial cannabis activities. The proposed draft ordinance provides that the city would refuse to adopt that would the city refuse to adopt the ordinance, the city would lose its authority to regulate cannabis-related activity. This provision is wrong. The city is legally empowered to regulate zoning and to amend its general plan. A rejection of the moratorium, therefore, would not cause the city to lose its authority over cannabis, and the city would remain empowered to shut down any unlawful activity within its incorporated territory. More importantly, the ordinance allows out-of-the-city medical cannabis delivery businesses to operate within the city limits and denies its local businesses, farmers, and growers the right to benefit from such a thriving economy. Such a position is largely unfair and undermines the local economy and prevents its development. The position adopted by the drafters on this aspect is in contradiction with the overall purpose of the ordinance, and we therefore request that the city modifies its draft ordinance to allow its local businesses to operate within the city's limits. Additionally, the County of Sonoma has offered priority to local businesses operator who can prove that they are local residents and that they've been in business before 2016. So why would the city take such an opposite approach and thus undermines the interest of its local growers and businesses? As you can see in our proposed ordinance, we encourage that you provide for local businesses, contributed to the local economy. There are a variety of ways to carefully incorporate the cannabis industry without abandoning
I'm gonna give you
Sonoma's
about 10 more
reputation.
seconds.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for your service to our community and your consideration of these comments.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Catherine Moylan Jefferson, and I'm happy to report I still live at Woodbound Avenue in Kenwood. However, my mother wasn't as lucky. I'm responsible for my 92-year-old mother whose assisted living residence was destroyed in the Coffee Park fire. It was just a miracle they got everybody out, because most of them were not even ambulatory. My mother currently benefits from a high CBD cannabis product from John Early's PharmaCann. If she's able to soon move to Oakmont because she's in temporary housing and they're all crammed in like sardines, being able to purchase PharmaCann products from a local Sonoma dispensary would be a benefit to her and to me and presumably to the citizens of City of Sonoma. I understand that the council is contemplating a proposed ordinance that would ban the establishment of a cannabis dispensary in the city limits. For the life of me, I don't understand the reasoning for such a ban, and I would oppose it. Finally and lastly, I want to thank all the first responders and everybody in all this wonderful community that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion and possibly an action. Who would like to get us started? Ms. Harrington?
I mean, I guess my question made it obvious that I don't think the city took it seriously at all, that this was supposed to be a 1-year maximum moratorium, because where we're at doesn't show that there was an expectation that it would expire today. It's expected that we're going to continue this on and on and on. And I have a problem with that, number one, because the voters voted that they wanted this to be legal, and they basically, I think, instructed us to work on it, and really nothing has been done. We had a study session, and here we are being asked to extend it again. Number two, we did have a straw poll at the end of the study session, and at that time, a majority of the council said they were in favor of a delivery system at the minimum, and other people said they were interested in a dispensary, at least two of us, and yet there's an option here for doing nothing and banning all cannabis. And I don't understand how, when you're given the direction of this council that did not include banning all cannabis, here it is on the agenda, somehow that's been paid for to research and present that to us. And I do have a problem with that, and it feels a little bit like advocacy against what the council has asked for. I'm not going to support any of the moratorium tonight, and if the city wants to get it together to create the ordinances like every other city in Sonoma County has been able to do, then we should do it right away. But I think that it's embarrassing at this point that every other city in the county has drafted these regulations, and that all we have to do is look at all of the examples and pull from them. We don't have to make it up whole cloth. There's a million places we can talk to for help about drafting the language. And the fire just happened, but there was an entire year before that where this work didn't get done. And I'm not going to just kick the can down the road. And I would prefer for there to be a lot more work having been done on that, but that's not what happened here. But I don't think it's solution to just say continue it, because I'm pretty sure if we continue it, that it will be an entire another year where almost nothing happens, and I have no confidence that anything else but that will happen.
Mr. Edwards?
So, I served on the planning commission when we had the initial conversations about cannabis and so on, and being in the farming business, I brought in ideas about organic certification, pesticides, et cetera, and we did a lot of work, and then the council decided that it was something that they weren't willing to take on at that time. And I know Mr. Silver brought up the fact that we all represent a couple thousand people. I've had dozens and dozens of conversations, and there's a lot of folks suggesting that, maybe Sonoma, being the size of the town we are, and the fact that the cannabis is already being distributed, medical and otherwise, and it's that maybe it'll give us a benefit not to have a dispensary in the city of Sonoma. And the fact that, and Mr. Early just got up and talked about that he's been doing this for 8 years, and the folks up in Santa Rosa are getting their medicine. I don't have any issues with what people do. I'm sure there's benefits to cannabis and derived products. I'm not an expert on it. It's not something that I use at this point. Maybe someday I will, or I'll have to. But what I see is what I'm hearing from people is we want people to have the right to be able to use what they need to use. I'm not in favor of everybody in their front yard growing plants and having it be all over the place. We had a situation where we had there's a couple spots in town that there's grow operations going on with what looks like 50 or 60 plants in the backyard, and it's like, I have a tough time with that, and I have young kids, and I just don't. That's not something that I want to see. I think we need a little bit more time. I don't think anybody's lacking accessibility to the product. I mean, I haven't seen that or heard that from folks that use the products, and I just don't see it. I am open, as I think we discussed before in our study session, about potential delivery. I've always thought we should have a pharmacy at the hospital and let that be a fundraiser for the hospital. But also, if you look at the Press Democrat report this morning about with what everybody's claiming, there's going to be all these taxes and all this benefit to the cities. I still don't believe it. I think if the farmers decide to go out and, well, we're just going to grow this till the cows come home, so to speak, then the prices won't be there. But all of these fees and all these requirements that are going on people, it was in the Press Democrat this morning that people are just going back to their traditional source of buying marijuana or cannabis, and through the illegal trade, because the fees are more than what you can buy it for, according to the newspaper. So, I mean, I just have, I think we need to do more work on this. I think there's, a year's not a long time in government. They're talking about Madeline Smart Train going all the way out to Solano now, and they said, yeah, we can probably get started in 20 years from now on something that I would like to do tomorrow. But it's, unfortunately, that's how government seems to work. And being an entrepreneur, and like I know Mr. Early is, I mean, I can see the frustration, but I think if we're going to do this, we have to do it completely right and not rush it through in the next 6 weeks. Thank you.
Who's next? Mr. Cook?
Well, I'll go ahead. I was hoping that we would do ordinance by ordinance, so I believe that we're just on the one. So I'd like to make a motion to approve an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonoma extending a temporary moratorium on the outdoor cultivation of non-medical cannabis. Second extension.
I'll second that.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah,
What
we have,
type of approval do we need for the resolution?
You need 4 affirmative votes of the council to adopt this ordinance.
And if the ordinance is not adopted, you're saying the state will come in and do?
The motion is to extend an existing moratorium on, was it outdoor cultivation? Was that the one you? Yes. Yeah, outdoor cultivation of recreational cannabis. So that if this ordinance expires tonight, there's no moratorium on the outdoor cultivation of recreational cannabis in the city of Sonoma. I'm trying to think whether we have a zoning code that addresses it. We may or may not. We may have to fall back on our zoning code. The council in December 2015 adopted a resolution declaring that the zoning code prohibits the outdoor cultivation of medicinal cannabis, because at that time in 2015 recreational cannabis was sort of nowhere on the radar screen, and the only thing that we were concerned about at that time was medicinal cannabis. So it creates confusion and uncertainty as to whether or not the fallback of the zoning code, the development code, would have any effect on the outdoor cultivation of recreational cannabis if the ordinance is allowed to expire tonight.
Yeah, please do.
So I agree with Councilmember Harrington, and I'll tell you why. I can only say that where I have been in government, I've done fantastic things. And being on this council, I don't do fantastic things. And we're all smart, we're all working together, but somehow it slips away, and this slipped away. And I don't understand that. I don't understand how this happens. And so I'm just really disappointed. I don't like to be in a position like this because I actually have an opinion at this point. But I certainly honor your no vote on the moratorium. But I have to tell you, I feel compelled that I have to do it because we need to move this thing forward, and we have a bigger bureaucracy possibly facing us. But I'm not happy. This is really making me unhappy. Thanks.
So at some point, we're going to be making 3 different actions tonight on these 3. With regard to the first one at hand, I find some of the comments from up here to be slightly disingenuous or at least confusing. This last moratorium was passed on December 12, 2016. I was the one no vote against it because I said I didn't think there was any hope that we would have something passed before it expired, which that's turned out to be true. But, you know, when the city staff is looking at all of the different things that we want to do, they put them in order based on priority, based on what a consensus of the council is supporting. And the fact is, this has never been a top issue for anyone up here on the council, and that's why it's never been at the top of the list, and that's why it hasn't been done. So I find people at this late in the game to suddenly, you know, be these huge advocates for this issue, where all along, you know, I was the only person up here poking and prodding it along, and one person alone isn't enough to get something put to the top of the list. There's always going to be other things on top of it. You know, I'm happy that we have been making progress on it. You'll see when we get to the moratorium related to commercial businesses, you know, I made a point to try to carve out an exception for deliveries because I just didn't want it to be a flat no. I wanted there to be an outlet for people to actually have deliveries, and I agree. Local is far better, but if the choice is nothing or something, you know, at least it buys us time and people can have access, you know, knowing that one day when we actually do have, hopefully, a local business, then our delivery will all be local. So, you know, I've been on this side of this entire time, constantly voting no against these things, and, you know, I've known that the only reason it hasn't moved slower is because there hasn't been enough council support to actually push it forward. So at this point, I mean, I guess we'll see where the votes end up, but I find it interesting that people wait till they get to this end of the game and suddenly come out of these enthusiastic supporters, because if this had happened earlier, this would have been moved up the list and we probably would have had this done already.
I have an additional comment. I'd like to say, as mayor, you're supposed to, I mean, I would request, as any mayor would do, to put this on the front line, to just push and coddle or whatever, I'm sorry, the expressions you used, does not do it. We cannot take that leadership role away from you as mayor. If this was important to you, then you should have set that, because you set the agenda with the city manager, and I think that's how I understand it to work.
I don't set the agenda, well, it doesn't actually work that way.
I certainly don't set the agenda. You sit with the city manager and help to set the agenda, and that agenda could have been set at your insistence. So I don't like being called disingenuous. I'm sitting along here for this ride that we're on. It is, I've never been on a ride like this before in any other place, and I'm just disgusted. And I expect my mayor to tell me this is going to be on the agenda. We insist on it. This council wants it, and it's not being done. So I'm sorry, I can't accept that as my responsibility.
We're going to go to Ms. Harrington next.
Well, I would just, you know, I think those comments, I don't know if they're directed at me. If they are, I find them somewhat offensive, because if you look at what's been accomplished over the last year, I had one priority, the Youth Commission, that got done. Council members Cook and Agramani have brought up over and over the Get cemeteries. Nothing has been done. You have brought up over and over housing. Nothing has been done. So when you say that the city staff was focused on the priorities of this council, I challenge you, beside the Youth Commission, to show any progress on a council goal that's been done. In fact, we had a goal session in the summer and we never even finalized those goals. So with regard to this council's ability to move forward passion projects, it's almost impossible. So the fact of the matter is, we set, or you set before I was on here, a 1-year limitation for city staff to get this done. That was the urgency. Have it done by today. It expires at midnight. And guess what? It's not done. And just like I get in trouble at work when my stuff isn't done, it was supposed to be done before this date, and that was the calendar. And so it doesn't need to be pushed along, because the city staff knows that it expires today. And it is our expectation as a council that it get done before it expires. And if that's not a legitimate expectation, then we should all quit right now, because nothing's going to get done. And that is what I'm saying. Do I think we should have no regulations and then the moratorium? No. That's the worst possible solution. But the people we have paid and tasked to do this over the last year have refused to do it. And that is not disingenuous on the part of anyone up here. And I do challenge you to say, what is one thing that you care about that got done this year?
Mr. Cook?
Well, the one thing I got done was the 2nd Street East stop signs. Of course, that took 2 years.
Mr. Cook?
I have a motion on the floor. Should I reread it? I'd like to call for a vote.
Has it been seconded?
I second it.
Aye.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do we have a second motion on the floor?
I'd like to make a motion for an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonoma extending a temporary moratorium except under certain circumstances on the indoor cultivation of non-medical cannabis. Second extension.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this item? Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. And I would like to, what's this one? Make a motion to approve an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonoma establishing a temporary moratorium. Nope. One moment. Establishing a temporary moratorium, except under certain circumstances, on the indoor and outdoor cultivation. Have we done this one? Of medicinal cannabis and all commercial cannabis activities except medicinal deliveries. This is the commercial activity with delivery, right? Alright, any discussion on this item? Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Anything further on this item?
Well, I guess I just would maybe just add a few words. And I can just say I appreciate the frustration of council. There have been a number of accomplishments, and I'd be happy to provide a list to council of some of those things. And there has been a lot of work that has been kind of in process and has been being teed up. Tasting rooms was a big piece of work this summer. There was a lot of work done by staff about doing research on the cannabis. And there were a number of things that were kind of teed up and left farmers market when we took over, and I think there's been a lot of work that has been done. There are things that are probably, a number of things sitting at kind of 80% completion. And the plan was over the fall to move through those things, and we will continue to do that. In terms of coming back to council, we'll review the calendar and look at the opportunity to bring back to council to get final direction and moving forward for permanent ordinances, et cetera, on this topic. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
I would just like to add too that in the last year, we changed city managers. We've gone through a lot of issues. We've had an enormous amount of appeals that have come back to us. So and I agree with the frustrations that, we spent my first year as a councilperson working on leaf blowers, and it just seems to drag on, and I can see how it's frustrating I know it's frustrating to me, it's frustrating to all of us, but, let's hope that we can move this forward as we're talking about in January, February, maybe March, and just get this thing moving and get it done once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.1, adopt a resolution approving an easement agreement granting a water line and well easement on the city's property at East MacArthur Street and 2nd Street East to the owners of the MacArthur Place Hotel parcel at 29 East MacArthur Street. And I believe we will begin with our Public Works Director.
Mayor Henley, members of council, this is following up on a discussion we had on October 2nd about the MacArthur Place property, and that there was rights granted to the property owner to use water from a well that's on city property that the city has acquired from that property owner some years ago in 2000. And now the property's changing hands, and the new property owner wanted to make sure those rights were very clear through an easement agreement. And so the easement agreement was a very short time frame item to bring to council, and in doing that, I realized after the fact I should have included all the attachments to that agenda item, and I apologize for not doing that. And so now you have the complete packet with the documents from the prior transactions, the letter that we received from the financial corporation that's involved with the property transaction for your review and consideration, leading up to this recommendation that the council adopt a resolution approving this easement agreement, granting a water line and well easement on the city's property at East MacArthur Street and 2nd Street East to the new owners of the MacArthur Place Hotel parcel. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any council questions at this time? None for now. At this time, I'm going to go out to the public for public comments. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion and an action. Ms. Harrington?
I'm going to support this easement at this time, but I do want to just broadly say that I think it's and I'm not sure how other cities work, but this is the second time in the last year that people have asked for clarification on the easement, and that has cost us paying for staff time and paying for attorney time, which I don't think was reimbursed by the person who sought the clarification. You know, they do have a remedy if they don't feel that their easement is clear, and that's to go to court if there's some problem with their easement. And so I don't want to be involved in providing free legal services to people who want clarifications on their easements. I don't think that's a good use of city resources. And so this work has been done. And I think we can see, you know, on the Shotgun Hill easement, that easement was written to not include building a road to where the easement is unless the ultimate housing project is approved. A lot of problems with that. And I think forward going, we should not engage in doing this type of work for people, and they can do what every other person has to do, which is seek a remedy through the courts and not have the city spend their money fixing up their easements.
Any further discussion or perhaps a motion?
I move to adopt a resolution approving an easement agreement granting a water line and well easement on the city's property at East MacArthur and 2nd Street East to the owners of MacArthur Place Hotel at 29 East MacArthur Street.
And I will second that.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Item 6.2, discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt an administrative policy regarding appointments to commissions and committees. And we will begin with our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Hunley and Council. The item before you is hopefully the last item over several meetings. I think Council's had at least 3 meetings, if not 4, looking at how you want to do your appointments and commission process. The administrative policy lays out a variety of elements. First, it groups commissions and committees in 2 groups, one a regional group, and in those places we will use the traditional kind of mayor appointment process with a member of the council, with some tweaks on how that process will be communicated out going forward, and that's outlined within the administrative policy. Also, then there's a group B of city commissions and committees, and in this place, this is a change the council wanted to do where if, for example, if we have a 7-member council, 5 of them will be appointed by individual council members, and you'll each make an individual appointment. The remaining 2 and the alternate will be made by a majority vote of the council as a whole. So those are some of the details that are laid out in the process. It also describes how an alternate and when an alternate can substitute in. There are 4-year terms for positions, unless noted otherwise by if it's a different body, but otherwise 4-year terms for the council. And there's no limit to the number of terms that someone can serve. The commissioner, the policy also lays out a commissioner continues to serve until a replacement has been sworn in. And one of the policy items that is here is kind of a better definition of what a Sonoma Valley resident is. The council does have an option of basically allowing a member to sit and be a voting member of your commission, and have that person not be a City of Sonoma resident, but rather be a Sonoma Valley resident. And as staff looked at maps, we are recommending that you use the Sonoma Valley Unified School District map. It seems to include most of the area of what we traditionally call the valley. It does exclude Kenwood, that goes far south, and it goes up into the hills to incorporate individuals in our community that live up in the hills. One other item that we're recommending a change, there was a desire by the council to have 15 days before you would receive the applications, because for the commissions where you will be doing individual appointments, you are not going to be doing formal interviews. You can decide individually to meet with candidates in that way. And so therefore, in 15 days generally we think will work fine. But like for this coming time, we are extending the application process for planning commission until the 13th, and you will meet on the 20th when we'll bring back to council to make appointments. And so therefore there's only a 7-day time period, and our recommendation is we change the language here to be a 7-day minimum and generally 15 days, because we can see from time to time the 15 days would not work, we think, in the interest of what council wants to have done. So the administrative policy is here for your comments and feedback, and the goal would be to have you approve the administrative policy, and then we come back on the 20th with appointments. And again, with most of this now being pulled out, not in the municipal code, but as we go forward, if there's changes or tweaks the council wants to make, they will be easier to do, since it just takes a resolution and an action of council at one meeting versus the ordinance process. So with that, Jeff and I are here and happy to answer any questions of the council.
Are there any council questions at this time? Seeing none, I will take it out to the public for public comment. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion and an action. Mr. Cook.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt an administrative policy regarding appointments to commissions and committees, and changing the language from 15 days to 7 days.
A second.
Sorry, point of clarification, does that also include the Sonoma, the school district boundaries as well?
Yes, that also includes.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
I just have, I think I've spoken to our city manager about this. I'm happy that we are going to meet the December 2nd date for training. My request, of course, and I think I saw somewhere, was I'm hoping that there are 2 more things: ethics training for commissions, and also how to run a meeting, including staff that is reporting to this. I think it's really important, especially if you want to get things right at these meetings.
And
Second?
I did. Oh, yeah, one. Well, this item, going back to a question posed earlier as to what we've accomplished this year, this is probably at the top of my list, if not in the top 2. We had known for a couple years that our existing system of appointment for commissions wasn't working out, and kept coming to bumps and roadblocks. And this was a huge project. I think it's a really big deal when a city completely changes the way that it appoints its citizen volunteer commissioners. And I'm excited to see next month what our planning commission will be. And also as a reminder that those applications, because of the fires, it's been extended until November 13th. So anyone out there who would like to be involved at that level, please apply. And I just wanted to thank everyone for going along this journey with me. I know that there was a lot of concerns in the beginning about what it would ultimately look like, but I think that we have put together something that is going to represent a wider array of what our community looks like, because the 5 of us are elected from similar but different parts of the community, and therefore the commission as a whole is going to be more representative of different perspectives also. And I think it's going to serve us well. So if there's no other comment, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi, aye.
Yes.
Aye. Item 6.3. Here, City Council Subcommittee Liaison Reports and information from staff on October fire recovery initiatives. Receive financial updates regarding October fire response initiatives. Adopt a resolution extending the proclamation of local emergency for an additional 30 days and provide any additional feedback and direction on items related to fire recovery, including request for letters of support from Congressman Thompson and fees in conjunction with the lighting of the plaza event. And we will begin with our city manager.
Great, thank you. I've got a few highlights, but we're going to kind of start off here as we did the last meeting and see if there's any updates from our subcommittees. Again, we have subcommittees and liaisons. And as we've come out of the fire, there are a number of kind of additional initiatives, both in terms of things the council may want to do and is currently working on, from recognition and appreciation, some liaison work on fundraising, working with our business community and tourism, and the local chamber. In addition, then there's also questions related to open space and erosion control and storm drain work. Housing is another item that the subcommittee's been able to meet there. And then some nonprofit coordination. So these are some subcommittees and liaisons that council's been doing a lot of work on, and I really want to tell council I appreciate. You each have been sitting in a lot of meetings and participating, and I appreciate the work on behalf of our community you've been doing. So with that, I'd like to maybe turn and start with the subcommittee, Councilmember Agramonte and Councilmember Harrington, in terms of the appreciation event, and I've got some additional information I can also provide and later on in my presentation in terms of an update on the costs and some additional information about the HEART program. So,
Thank you so much. It's I don't know if everyone's received this. I don't know how this was sent out, but I think it's a nice outline of what we're going to be doing in the next until around the 19th, and it includes, if anybody goes hungry in Sonoma, it's your fault, because there's a lot of appreciations with, I think, Freedom Week, of course, and Veterans Day ceremonies, which of course includes a breakfast, and Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Open House and Pancake Breakfast. That's on November 12th. The Veterans Day is, of course, November 11th. And which I find really exciting, the City of Sonoma ceremony of tribute, recognition, and gratitude, and that's followed by the lighting of the plaza. And of course, again on the 19th, a community breakfast. And I just think there are a lot of wonderful events coming up. Just to say we are so proud that we have survived this, and of course it's because of our first responders, and also wonderful neighbors here in Sonoma who have stepped up for people who need assistance. And I'm really gratified to belong to this community.
I mean, I guess we said it last time. I would just add that I know there's been some concern in the community about the expense of these events. And we'll talk in a minute about the estimated cost. But basically, just to clarify that we are joining up with events that are already existing. We're not spending the money on creating our own event. We're giving some financial support to Freedom Week so that we can thank our first responders in a real way. We are adding on to the lighting ceremony, which was already going to happen, so we're not paying to put up the stage. We are creating some banners, and we're doing some outreach, and we are putting together a program, and we're going to be doing some direct thank yous to the people that came here, but we are not spending tremendous amounts of money on having a party, which is something I had heard people say we're doing. We are thanking the people that helped us. We are coming together as a community to be together in the holidays and also right after the fires, so just to clarify.
Mr. Edwards?
So one of the conversations that I've had, and I'll just add with just my little bit of work with nonprofits, and the idea of having this, I don't call it a party, I think Kathy used the word appreciation. And when I think about all the work that we did with the SDC folks, and that where they, everybody thinks of the SDC as that place out there, but all the SDC clients and the workers, and I don't know how many hundreds of people there were, but they were our next door neighbors. I mean, they're still our next door neighbors out at the center, but they were living in the city limits for those few days, and I'm very proud of the work that the city did with that, and I think inviting that group, which I think is happening, to be part of the community again. And I just think that the regular folks who those 2,000 people apiece that weren't necessarily, we were all part of the fire and the that whole action, but it's I think it's a great way to bring people together, and I think it's an inexpensive way to bring people together to really talk to each other and acknowledge each other, and then acknowledge our neighbors that were part of this whole event. And I've heard some of those things as well, but I don't look at it as a party in any way. And I know that it'll bring people together, it'll bring people to our shops, and remind people of why we're so happy with this city of Sonoma. Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
And I also agree, and I wanted to thank Madeline Agramonte and Amy Harrington and city staff for putting this together. I did want to clarify a little bit. I mentioned this every once in a while that social media sometimes doesn't get it right, and it's really hard. I'm not going to respond on social media. I always tell people to give me a call because I was reading some of the comments, and it was really unfair to the city of Sonoma and everyone involved when they're throwing numbers around, like the city of Sonoma is throwing a party with taxpayer dollars. I look at it that it's a great event, and that's why I thank city staff and Councilmember Agramonte and Councilmember Harrington. It's like closure. I think that we had a traumatic event. Even though the city of Sonoma, we did not lose any structures, but our sphere of influence, a lot of the tax dollars that come to the city of Sonoma come from our friends in what I call the sphere of influence, which is Sonoma Valley. I'm hoping that this is a way that we can all come together, and I think people need this. And if you look at the numbers, what the cost was, and you look at the banners, that's one thing that you don't get on social media is you don't get the truth. We're putting banners around. This is something the city of Sonoma does on other events. So I just wish that when people are reading this, call your council members. If you have a concern, I don't like to be called an idiot on social media because I spent $60,000 to throw a party, because I didn't. And I think that's very unfair. And I'm just saying that because I know the local newspapers here, and I think that when reporting, we need to get some of these out to the public, because social media can be a great thing, but if you just see what happened during the fire, you heard about all the wineries that burned down, you hear all this negativeness, and people, for some reason, they think social media is the truth. And I just wish that we can all come together after this traumatic event. So thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to the event.
One quick comment. I'd like to draw, if anyone's still watching this, I'd like to draw your attention to KSVY. They have scrolled all of the participating fire departments and cities and services that have come to the county, and it really is, I don't know, it's pretty emotional when you look at all those people who have converged on this county for various reasons. And I'd also like you to know, as my son corrected me, I said even Samoa was here. He says there's a Samoa, California, and I wasn't aware of that. So it just stands alone on KSVY that it's Samoa. So I'd like to let you know that's in Northern California by Crescent City. So I thought that's amazing. So, but just please take a look at the scrolls of names. It's amazing how many different departments and agencies responded to Sonoma County.
And I'm going to ask David to flip to a slide, excuse me, I put together that's got a chart. I think it's one of the last ones, David. So just a point of clarification, both for council and members and community. Again, about a week ago or 10 days ago, we were in front of council and saying we want to do some city appreciation. We wanted maybe to do some housing. We need additional help on public information. We didn't know exactly what was going to be needed, but we wanted to have some additional funding, and we put together a very rough placeholder budget. That's what it was, because we had not had the conversations about what the interest was. It was placeholder, and again, that's what you do, and then we go through and we really finalize the numbers, and so we've been working on that. In terms of the actual civic appreciation and gratitude ceremony, this will be under $10,000. It's basically, we've got some temporary staff who, our event manager who helps put together events. She's doing all the choreography to bring all kinds of volunteers and all the nonprofits together, and putting her expertise on that. And then it's about $5,000 in supplies and some different things to really kind of decorate the stage, put together some clear messages, some information boards for the public. We're thrilled to have some great new banners using the Love in the Air theme that's been picked. The banners were created to really show that this is Sonoma and Glen Ellen and Kenwood and Shelville, to really be kind of symbolic and very symbolic to really highlight the overall valley that we are a part of and that we have survived with. In addition, there's some really kind of some branding and some words in there that say protected by heroes, coming together, neighborly kindness, really trying to capture the experience that we had. These banners will be under $7,000, and I think we'll be able to use these banners for 3-4 years. We can put them up annually, we can remember, and it can be part of what we do every year to be thankful about where we as a community have survived. And then, you know, as I've talked with folks, since this is my town as well, there's just such an appreciation for what was done by our first responders and by all the volunteers that helped and came together and helped with the shelter and helped with the food and just the individual things that everyone helped each other with. And so with this whole, the love in the air is thicker than the smoke, that's the whole theme then, to then build and use hearts to help decorate the plaza, both for Freedom Week, hopefully, and also for looking at our actual civic ceremony. And so part of the work that staff has done with some of the ideas that have come forward from the council subcommittee is reaching out, and Friedman's has donated plywood to make wooden hearts. The high school is cutting all those wood hearts for us for free. Staff is working on painting some of those and getting volunteers to do that as well. Artiscape is going to be holding, and I'll have another slide to show you some timing, but they're going to be doing outreach to have tables and have their Van Gogh available for individuals to create their own hearts. And then the Sonoma Community Center is actually this Friday, and I'll have a few more details, going to be hosting some sessions there to allow people to come and decorate their hearts. And then we're assuming that in this town, people are so creative, there'll be all kinds of different hearts that will be created and put in places. And I know that there's the vintners and growers will be reaching out to the wineries to hopefully have hearts created in some of the wineries as well. So that is really the community outreach and appreciation. There's a little bit of an ad in here for an ad with the IT, and then there's really some supply money. And then the next piece was really thank you letters and maybe some kind of proclamations and framing of those plaques and that type of thing. We've not kind of gotten the more specifics on this. I think this will be less as well, but there's a lot of people to say thank you to. And that's important to come together as a community. We probably, I have no doubt there's tens of thousands of dollars that volunteers have donated in this community to support during the emergency. The food bill alone, it does not look like we're going to get much more in terms of the food bill. The restaurants, the markets, individuals have donated tens of thousands of dollars to feed the EOC, to feed first responders, to feed the shelters. That speaks to who we are as a community. And so spending a little money to say thank you and having us come forward felt like the right thing to do. So the overall budget you see here, there's some money here to help our public information and to continue to do some recovery. We had 15,000, just a pure plug number for contingency. I don't see us needing any of that. So I think the overall dollars will be well under $30,000, well under 29,000. And again, the event itself, I think, will be under 10. So I just want to say I think it's going to be really important for us to come together. As I hear members of our community tell stories, and as I go to events with people coming together and working through the trauma and the grief that we've had is super important as we rebuild as a community. Even though we didn't have damage, we definitely had a very scary week, and our valley had damage and our county had damage. And we don't know exactly how we're going to bounce out of this yet, hopefully well. But we will have some economic impacts that we'll have to see what occurs. So I'm going to ask David to go back just to the second slide where I've got a little bit of more information on the Love in the Air. So the Art Escape will have a table at the Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Open House on November 12th. And then they're also going to do drop-in heart-making workshop in the Springs on November 15th from 6:30 to 9. And then the Sonoma Community Center is holding workshops this Friday. And if people have additional questions, they can reach out to Lisa Jansen or contact the city at specialevents@sonomacity.org. And on our website, if you go to the city's website, there is, and / the Love in the Air, we've created a page. People can find out more information. And as we have different things come up, we'll continue to add. With that, I will go back to, if we go back to the reports, and we'll finish the Appreciation Subcommittee and maybe shift to fundraising and see Councilmember Agramonte I'm not sure if there's been any activity this last week or not on this one.
Yeah, well, I know there's an awful lot of money being raised around the county and in fact in Sonoma. My concern is that everyone is actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, observing, doing what you say you're going to do, and if the money, I don't know what administrative costs, and I'm going to have to connect with Patricia Schultz, because I think she's actually looking into that as well. So thank you. I just wanted to draw our attention, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but 2 items for further council direction. Did we do that with respect?
No, yeah, I'll come back to that after we do the reports. Thank you.
All right.
So, on to, which, I don't know, did we have a meeting that I didn't know about? I don't think we met in the last week. We met last Monday, but we haven't met this past week.
Yeah, I think we've got a meeting this coming week, so nothing this last week on business tourism there. And then, Councilmember Cook, in terms of open space, I know that we do have our Public Works Director, Colleen Ferguson, and Chris Pegg with her staff that can provide some updates of some county meetings. If you'd like to say anything first or after, your preference.
I'll go after if I could have public.
Good evening, Council. I'll just cover updates on 2 domains. The first is fire-related impacts within city limits. Much as I mentioned last week, last Monday, there were impacts to the Overlook Trail area and the Montini Preserve. We scrambled all the jets before the first rain, and we hit all the high priority areas. We're planning what we're going to do next for the remaining 80% of low priority areas. What's taking up some of our time right now is actually responding to impacts that were outside of the city limits. We're waiting for a forthcoming report from CAL FIRE's Watershed Emergency Response Team. I want to give you guys a little bit of update on what the Watershed Emergency Response Team does. It's an interdisciplinary team of expert geologists, engineers, hydrologists, and GIS specialists convened at CAL FIRE's pleasure in response to large fires. There's been 5 WERTs, as they're called, so far. This will be the 6th. The objective or mission of a WORT is to identify areas where lives or property may be damaged by landslides or debris flows that are caused by changes in the vegetation or hydrologic characteristics of burned areas. Their report is forthcoming on November 15th. We expect to have a quantification of the relative increase in flooding that we might expect in the city of Sonoma. Basically what they do is they look at satellite data on which areas were burned, they classify how severe the burns were, and then they say for a rainfall event with this much rainfall, we expect this much flooding before the fires, and there might be this much more after the fires. We'll know what the exact numbers are on the 15th, and we'll look forward to sharing those with you. And I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Following up on the WORT, that a lot of that information has gone into discussions at the first meeting of the Watershed Protection and Restoration Task Force Executive Committee. The first meeting was last Thursday at the Sonoma County EOC in Santa Rosa, which is still a very active, involved EOC. Still very much open in Santa Rosa. There's just a lot to deal with up there. This committee includes representatives from the Water Agency, from county parks, from county public works, City of Santa Rosa stormwater team, the Open Space District, County Council, Cal OES, FEMA, and Cal Fire. So it was just the right people to have to discuss the watershed and protection of the watersheds in the local area. One of the things that was announced at that meeting is that CAL FIRE was sending another team of staff and experts to Sonoma County that next day on Friday to help with watershed work. And kind of like the WORT folks, they have a lot of experience dealing with watersheds after a fire. And so they're bringing their experts to leverage the local expertise, because we know our watersheds, but we don't know how they're affected by fires as much as these other folks do. So the idea is to pair together and take some immediate action to protect the watersheds. The San Francisco Bay Water Quality Control Board is teaming with Sonoma Ecology Center to do water sampling throughout Sonoma Valley. So that was something I learned at that meeting. The Water Agency is also working on public information to landowners, because a lot of the watershed damage, of course, is not on public property, it's on private property. So landowners are curious, and everybody else downstream of the property owners wants them to get good information about what they can do to protect their property. So there aren't more issues downstream and for their own protection as well. So the Water Agency is working on sharing that with their public information officer leading that outreach. And then the CAL FIRE team, kind of following up on the work that was done, is planning to help local agencies develop what they're calling watch and warning notifications to property owners for predicted flash floods and debris that, again, may be predicted by NOAA. And one of the things they're planning to do is deploy a temporary radar weather station in the Sonoma area, because there's kind of Chris understood this better from the work meeting, but I picture it like this stealth atmospheric river that can go under the existing radar, because the radar coverage that we have in the valley is pretty high, and this additional instrument will help get that radar lower, where we'll be able to detect low-lying atmospheric rivers that could be flooding problems for us that we can't detect with our current radar system. And again, at this group meeting, they did the group consensus, as we talked about emergency declarations, is to keep it going through the winter, 30 days at a time, but until we're through a couple winters is what they're thinking. We don't really know the extent of the damage from the fires because we haven't experienced the runoff from the fires yet. The committee's planning to meet a couple times a week for now. And unfortunately, there is a call-in option, so I'll be able to attend the meetings in Santa Rosa from Sonoma. That's the report. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
I was just going to finish comment on it.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank city staff. Chris Pegg and Colleen Ferguson are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They're making me look good as the liaison. I'm just here to answer, probably public questions. I remember during the fire, calling our city manager, Kathy, and saying that when this fire's over, there's going to be more work. And what I was talking about that moment as being a vineyard manager is I know erosion control and what happens. And we had a WAC meeting today, and I was actually going to meet with the city manager at 11, my usual time, but it was so interesting hearing the stories of the different agencies talk about the fire. And the importance is a lot of people don't realize what glazing is when you get such a hot fire that it turns the soil where water won't even permeate into it. It'll just get runoff. That runoff goes into our watershed. Even though earlier I said no structures were hurt in the city of Sonoma, we're the end result of that watershed. So it's very important, and I appreciate city staff taking this so serious. I think Chris is doing a great job. I know that you're meeting with a lot of people. Any way I can help. And the other note that I learned today that was interesting, a lot of the oils that come from some of the brush actually causes an oil slick, which means that water won't permeate in other areas where the fire was going, didn't cause this glazing effect. So, like I said, the last meeting, what we're hoping for is just little amounts of rain at a time to try to get the soak in the non-glazing areas, and hopefully we'll start getting some kind of ground cover out there. So thanks again.
So the next group is the Housing Subcommittee with Mayor Hunley and Councilmember Harrington.
The Housing Subcommittee met, when did we meet? Last week? A few days ago? I don't know, it all blurs together. And we discussed a number of different ideas that the city of Sonoma can do. Even though we did not lose any housing within the city limits, everyone is aware that there was already a housing crisis, and now just up the valley, not far away in Santa Rosa, it's been compounded by the loss of thousands of homes. So I believe at our next meeting, we might be looking at an urgency ordinance covering some of these and get to talk about it as a whole. But topics discussed included rent gouging, whether it would make sense for the city of Sonoma to have its own, or to direct our code enforcement officer to investigate and monitor the state anti-gouging law. Possibility of temporary RV parking, temporary allowable living in guest houses, fee waivers for accessory units, and with regard to our current vacation rentals, encouraging them to take on winter tenants and other program ideas. And then there's also a number of things coming down the pipeline which they all will hopefully eventually help us alleviate that. But I do hope that as we move down this, that now that we have this extra added sense of urgency, that if certain projects come down the pipeline that could be beneficial, that we could do our best to get them to construction. But did I forget anything? That's it.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add to that. At your next meeting, we do expect to bring back an urgency ordinance for the council to consider that addresses many of the items that the mayor just reviewed, as well as a possible allocation of funds to subsidize the fees for accessory dwelling units. And later on this week, the subcommittee will meet again to focus next more on longer-term measures to support the development of affordable housing.
So, I think this is a point, if there's general support from council, or if any other council member has concerns about anything, again, this is a place we would be, could bring something back based on the recommendation from the subcommittee. Hopefully in the next meeting, there has been work that's been done by other agencies that we can use as models. And so if it's a pleasure of the council, we could try to, we would work quickly to bring something back to you to consider at your next meeting.
So I have a suggestion, and I don't know if it fits within what you are looking at, but we were approached, I think, a couple of times in last few years from Sonoma County Legal Aid, I think, and they are the ones that deal with rental issues, so I don't know if that's something that you all have discussed, but it might be something you can consider, possibly supporting that organization. I don't know in what capacity they would be doing anything right now, but I just think it's something that might be interesting to look at.
Oh, I think Mayor Hunley did also, discuss that there has been presentations about forming a land trust, and with all the donations coming forward, is it possible that we can figure out how to form a land trust here? So that was another option discussed.
Yeah, but I appreciate the legal aid suggestion. We had thrown around other ideas ranging everything from rental assistance to Councilwoman Harrington had a great idea of having seeing if we could put together some sort of centralized clearinghouse for background checks so people wouldn't have to keep paying fees every time they do, and for people who haven't been landlords before, they would be more comfortable. So that's also an avenue that we are exploring.
So is that something, I mean, I'm really stretching it. Is that something where some of our reserves might be put into the housing strategies with respect to this? Funds that could be put in for that type of support? I don't know,
I think some of these would have, whether we'd have one big separate fund or little ones, but for example, if we were going to go forward with having fee waivers or partial waivers for accessory units, setting some sort of set fund ceiling there and then seeing, what the interest is.
I think you know this, but just for the public, when redevelopment ended, for whatever reason, the city of Sonoma did not decide to become the successor agency to redevelopment. So we aren't officially tasked, although we have to deal with it, we aren't tasked and don't have the money to provide housing like other cities that decided to become the successor agency do. And so, in a way, we're currently working around the edges because we're not the successor agency. I don't know if the staff feels differently.
No, I would agree. And yet even those folks that chose to be the successor agency, at this point, there's not a lot of funding options available, but yeah, you basically were, if you became the successor agency, you were responsible for ongoing maintenance and reviewing and doing all of that work, and there was, I think, a very modest amount of money available through the state program in order to, do that. And for early on, when cities had to decide, frankly, there was no money. If you wanted to be the housing successor agency, you had no administrative money that came from redevelopment anymore. So a number of cities did choose to shift the housing successor agency to the county and kind of get out of that business because there was no administrative support or funding, and that was a real concern. So again, the law evolved a little bit, and there is a modest amount of administrative funding that now goes to the county. And they are looking at some ways to try to incentivize housing again, but it's a very different animal than what it was before in the world of redevelopment. I think what staff will do is, working with the subcommittee, we will work to see if there's a few things we can bring you at the next meeting where you could potentially take some actions. Councilmember Agramonte is correct. There has been questions raised in the past from legal services. I know they are currently providing services, I believe, at Lalouse, but that could be an opportunity even to expand or provide another location or something if there's interest there. So we'll bring some back, some where there might be maybe what I would call, for lack of a better term, some low-hanging fruit, some items that council could move on quickly, which is, I think, what the subcommittee wanted to do. And then we can start to take some bites forward.
Mr. Edwards?
If I could just add something, that I think to create the incentive for the development community with not necessarily the easing of rules or CEQA, et cetera, but to make it so it's not every project's not a 5 or 6 year project to get it accomplished, because if we do that, we're going to be in the same boat with whoever the next council is in 5 or 6 years. So to take some of those ideas and some of the fees, I think if you can encourage those incentives, we might not have to spend any money to get it done. The developers will spend the money to build those properties or build those properties. Thank you.
Yeah, we had discussed, I know some other areas are doing to make it even easier, pre-approved plans for little guest, or I guess it wouldn't be a guest house, it'd be a accessory unit. So that is something on the table where it's, you know, get to pick from A, B, or C, or D, and know that if you pick that plan, you don't have to go through the planning commission. But thank you. And I think that's probably good for the housing committee.
Okay, thank you. And then Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, I don't know if you have any update on the nonprofit coordination.
Well, it's most of my coordination has been with the food bank, and Sonoma Market again this week came through with about 6,000 pounds of great food that's going off to the food bank, and they're just happened to coordinate at my warehouse on 8th Street because it comes from Sacramento, et cetera, and the food bank picks up there. We're working with Hunt Bailey, who called me today. They've got a group of 115 cyclists coming through town on the 18th. They're going to end up at Buena Vista, and or 17th, I think it is. And they're the folks are raising $5 per mile. They're going to give half of it to the Rotary Club and half of it to the Redwood Empire Food Bank to continue this feeding operation. The feeding operation at St. Leo's is just continuing to grow, and that'll just keep going on, and the kind of support that's come in. Rotary, I think we're somewhere around $350,000 so far. Another 18,000 came in today. So that's continuing to grow with the Sonoma Strong Group, and that money is rolling out to different folks. And we still have materials coming into the Watma Center, Field of Greens, and it's people are still giving. Like it's really amazing, and we're getting it out as fast as it can come in. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you.
Oh,
I'm
a
sorry.
comment.
on
Oh,
this
just a
item?
question. Are you still going to do the same Thanksgiving?
Oh, yeah. Thanksgiving is going to be at the Vets Building, and I'm getting a lot of calls from people, folks who've lost their homes, and they're coming and they want to help. And what I found, I went to the Marines Memorial, or Marines Birthday Bash, or Birthday Ball, they call it, on Saturday night. And I think there were 9 people there that lost their homes, but they were there giving to the Marine Organization for Wounded Warriors and veteran causes. And it's just amazing that the people that are, you know, have lost the most are giving back. I think it's pretty incredible. But Thanksgiving will be serve hot organic dinner on Thursday at 3 o'clock. And it should be great.
Free to everyone, right?
Free, absolutely free to everyone.
Who, if
Always
people-
has been.
If people want to volunteer, who do they contact?
John Gurney at the community center.
Community Center, John
Yep.
Gurney.
And then also the Vintage House is doing Thanksgiving as well, so they have a contact person there right now, and they're taking volunteers. I think they break you up to set up or serve.
Cool.
Great, okay. Thank you for all the reports and good work by council. Appreciate that. Moving to just a few other things in the next slide. So there are a couple of other places that we're asking for in the staff report, looking for some direction. On Friday, the mayor received a request from Congressman Thompson to basically look at a letter of support to maintaining tax deductions for uninsured losses resulting from the disaster. So currently the IRS does allow taxpayers to deduct uninsured losses related to the destruction of their home, household items, or vehicles in a federally declared disaster. And currently, the 3 major hurricanes that hits the southern United States are included. But based on some current legislation change, that deduction would be eliminated, and our fires are not included. And so there was a request from Congressman Thompson to write a letter that would basically show the council's support for maintaining that deduction. So it's something we would need to try to get in tomorrow if we can. So if the council's interested, we could have a letter signed on behalf of by the mayor on behalf of the council.
And it occurs to me, we haven't gone to public comment for this item, have we?
No, we're
All
still
right.
kind of
So-
doing the broad report, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, so I guess after we come back from public comment, we will
Go through the
take
action items.
and figure out where we all stand on these things.
Okay. The other action item for council to consider after public comment is the fees for the lighting in the plaza. So this is, there's, as we know, the Civic Appreciation event that's happening kind of in conjunction with the plaza on the 18th, and we'll be utilizing some of their event and infrastructure. And so historically, the city, we pay for the electricity for the lights, and the visitors, the Tourism Improvement District pays for the funding, and then the Visitors Bureau for the lights, to install the lights, and then the Visitors Bureau does the coordination and puts together the event on behalf of the city for community residents to come out and enjoy. So there's fees of about $1,451, and recommending that we waive those fees as part of our support, not only for the lighting event, but for the overall civic appreciation event, since we're linking those. And then the last item in the staff report talks about the emergency proclamation. At our in October, when we talked about this, again, this was a proclamation that I originally put in place in the EOC, and then the council ratified within 7 days. And so we're sitting here in November, and it needs to be approved every 30 days or it does not continue. Part of what I did over the last week is reach out to a number of folks to try to learn more, and so did our city attorney, reaching out to some different individuals. So I talked to a couple city managers, both in Malibu, San Bruno, San Diego, that have been through these fires, these types of situations, and their general recommendation to me was there is no rush to get rid of it. You really want to make sure you're on firm ground in terms of, especially with the kind of the storms that can occur and the conversation we had prior to waiting, and just make sure you're on firm ground before it goes away. In addition, if you're still figuring out some of the FEMA and the Cal OES reimbursements, which we are, there's going to be a 2-day training some point later in November for all the public agencies to go and learn more about that process. And while some of our costs, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment, are starting to get sorted out, there's still some additional costs that are still unknown. And so at this point I am recommending, and there is a proclamation in front of you, to extend the proclamation for another 30 days. The next item is just in terms of a cost update. We are continuing to get and work through these numbers. One, in terms of the fire costs, all the fire department costs have been forwarded and are in process with CAL FIRE and Cal OES for reimbursement. Again, because fire's got a system on this. Mutual aid, they turn in their information to the state, and usually within 3 to 4 months they get their reimbursement. And so there's good confidence we'll be reimbursed within this fiscal year, and so therefore no need to take an additional drawdown at this point. In terms of police costs, I'm very appreciative to say that the Sheriff's Department has basically decided that for the time period of October 10th through October 23rd, and not just the overtime, but all the regular time of all the sworn personnel, and actually all the employees that were working are not going to be charged to the city of Sonoma. They're going to take all of those hours, and they are going to charge them to the Sheriff Department budget as they look through calls and discussed where folks are spending the time. Clearly, since the majority of the threat was outside the city limits, they are going to seek reimbursement for all those costs as part of the sheriff's budget. So that actually ends up being it will be a reduction in our November invoice based on that. And I think that frankly just really speaks to kind of the integrity of the Sheriff's Department, and I'm appreciative of Commerce Chief Sackett and the entire fiscal team and looking at what they thought was fair to do. If this hadn't been done, we would have had those costs and we would have had to seek reimbursement, and the law enforcement process is not as streamlined as fire, so it is in all likelihood from my conversations I've had with folks, it sounds like we would have had to front those costs and gotten reimbursed, and potentially not in this fiscal year. We are having conversations with the shelter costs with Sonoma County to see if they will take responsibility for those or whether we pay those and then have to seek reimbursement. Those conversations are still in process. Our water expenses and extraordinary water use, Public Works is looking at this, and I might ask Colleen to speak briefly on this in just a minute. And then the tax loss to the TOT and sales tax, we know we have had loss. Anecdotally, I've been speaking to our different hotel operators. And again, as council knows, a lot of businesses were closed, but we're not going to have some of those figures for a period of time. But there will be some tax revenue loss that will impact, and we'll need to deal with at mid-year budget. So maybe I'll briefly ask Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director, to give you a brief update just on water.
You know, we're at the beginning of November, so the amount of data that we have and have been able to analyze is not that much so far, because we just finished reading the meters and getting the bills out. The amount of water we used, though, between purchasing from the water agency, which is of course where most of our water comes from, plus the wells that we had pumping a lot of water into the system during the fires, especially at the water agency's request to keep the demand on their system down. So total, we used 213 acre feet of water in October of 2017. And we don't have it broken down, oh, this week of the fire. No, it's a month, right? So the month of October, that's how much water the community used. Now, was that a lot of water? Was it a minimal amount of water? It's hard to say. If you go back a few years, like before the drought, 2012, we used 243, 2013, 256. So that seems like it's less water. But then 2014, 180 acre feet, 2015, 193 acre feet, 2016, 164 acre feet. Really depends a lot on how hot it is in the month of October and how much people are conserving during a drought. So when we just look at it on aggregate, it's hard to say. Of course, the concern is two things. One, some people probably used very little water in October because they left town and they didn't use any water. Now, some of their neighbors may have stayed in town and been using an enormous amount of water, trying to keep everything wet on their property, on their neighbor's property, and all that. So we're trying to work on a way to be positioned to work with customers who may come to the city and say, wow, that was a high water bill, and this is why it was that much water used, because we were trying to prevent the fires from hitting Sonoma. And then we do know that the firefighters were using water. So we may have bought a lot of water that we won't be able to bill anyone for. So we're still analyzing all the data, but now you know what factors we're considering and how we're thinking about it, but we don't have enough data to say that this is what we think we should do. And any input would be welcome.
I think we have a question.
And Colleen, I have a question. So last year at this time, we had about 7 inches of rain in October.
Yeah.
So
Didn't use much
It's
water.
been hot, and I'm sure that might have affected your numbers
Sure.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So that concludes staff's presentation and conversation. So
Oh, I did have a question, I'm sorry. What are the $144,000? You have all the list of things that are not a cost, but what is the $144,000?
sorry, let me pull it here. Thank you. Yeah, the preponderance of the cost, again, is the evacuation shelters. So about, there is an initial estimate from the school district of about $75,000. Of that 78 is related to the school costs. And then we've got, in terms of miscellaneous supplies, and happy to share all these spreadsheets with council. There's, there were cots that were bought. There was oxygen for the shelter. We had to buy some oxygen for the STC folks when they were with us. That's actually up in the evacuation center. So there's also some cleaning of some of the facilities that's both in the evacuation shelter, et cetera. So there's a breakdown of all of those bills. So happy to share those.
And I think anybody who wants to see it, if you look at the packet online, there's a spreadsheet in there.
Any other questions before we go out to the public? All right, at this time, I will take it out to the public comment.
Fred Allebach, 195508 Street East, and apropos of the agenda setting, I just wonder why that always the things that I'm most interested in are last. I don't know how you guys figure that out, but it's always that way, it seems like. I'd like to make a number of comments for the invitations to the party or to the event, the appreciation event. There was 500 people who evacuated to Lawson's Landing and Dillon Beach during the fires, and I was one of them. So I would suggest inviting the Lawson Vogler family and their friends to the event, as well as the Tamales Fire Department and the Tamales High School principal, and the Marin Community Emergency Response Team, who was all there. And so I think it would be really nice to invite them and have them have a thank you letter and maybe a plaque. As far as the Overlook Trail goes, the Overlook Trail stewards have fixed up the approximately 12 bulldozer crossings that came across the trail and graded the trail back to a condition where it can take the winter rains and run off and not erode on trail itself. So you can know that it's messed up around the hillside, but the trail itself is fixed up pretty nice by the Overlook Trail stewards. I'd like to stand in support of the housing subcommittee and the urgency ordinance, and it seems like now is the time to do it while people are needing it. So it would seem like you would want to get that done as soon as possible for the suggestions that you had. And it sounds like you have some other long-term things coming up, long-term measures. And so I'll look forward to that, and maybe those can be in conjunction with the Hidden Insight based housing task force that's looking at a lot of things in the valley as far as getting housing going. So that would be good. And for having projects that won't take 5 or 6 years to do, it would be a good idea to have them come out initially so that they were acceptable to a wide range of the community. So that if you had a 35% inclusion on a project and this event sparked some good creativity and thinking outside the box, maybe nonprofit developers can partner with market rate. You can get 35% inclusion, everybody will be happy, and then it'll get passed faster, because it won't seem like it's all just market rate or all just affordable housing. So that's a couple of suggestions that I had, and I got up this morning and I thought it was 4:30, but it was 3:30, so I've just been hanging on by a thread to make my comment here. So, good night.
Thank you.
Laura Gallion, 434 Rosalie Drive. I am very thrilled to see this letter that you're anticipating, and I am urging you to definitely sign this going to Congressman Thompson. I received a phone call myself trying to garner support throughout the county in my other hat as chair for the Sonoma County Democratic Party. And I just wanted to say that several councils have weighed in on this and are trying to do likewise. This is taking, I feel, an exclusion that is definitely not supporting the people of California. And to me, we are community, and in this particular way, we need to have this tax exclusion put here. There are people that this would totally bankrupt them, not having this opportunity. There are people who are uninsured as renters. There are so many people who are still trying to determine what their status is. And our accounting gurus of the world will be having enough problems when it comes to tax time. I think this is only appropriate that this be incorporated. You're not doing it just for this particular city or this county. You are doing this for the entire state of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. And so we have 3 potential items for action. The letter, the fee waiver for the lighting of the plaza, and the declaration of emergency.
Correct.
So does anyone have discussion or a motion? Mr. Cook?
We'll go ahead with the resolution first. I'd like to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma extending the proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency.
I'll second.
Can I make a friendly amendment? It's, can we get a report at each council meeting if any actions are taken under the proclamation?
Yes, we can. Is there a way to do that? Just, can I do that under my city manager report, assuming that there is a verbal report? Are you looking for a written report?
No, I guess, the question would be, nothing has happened since the last one, right? And we're anticipating nothing will happen presumptively. So I'm just saying, if an action is taken, can we be informed of it publicly?
Yes, we can do that.
Would you like
Yeah.
to amend your motion?
I amend my motion for that.
And a second? All right. I've got a roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. All right, are there any other motions to give? Ms. Harrington?
Oh, make a motion to send a letter to Congressman Mike Thompson in support of retaining the deduction for uncovered losses in emergencies. Does that cover it?
I'll second that.
All right, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. And Mr. Cook?
I have a question for the fees for the lighting of the plaza. Who would be paying that if it wasn't?
So this would have been something that would have been paid by the Visitors Bureau in terms of the lighting of the plaza.
And that would come from the TID or would come from the Visitors Bureau?
It would come from the Visitors Bureau. I'm not sure whether there would be TID funding connected. I'm not sure that level of detail, but it would come from the Visitors Bureau in terms of the lighting. In the past, my understanding is that these fees were waived by the prior manager. It did not come to council, and so I wanted to bring it to council formally and make it your recommendation. The fees, the city has been a sponsor for the fee waiver. Before the fire occurred, one of the things that we had been talking about doing was clarifying on our community fund program and our heritage funds, like taking these heritage events and community events. And so part of what I had been working on was kind of going to bring some recommendations back to council and create some kind of clarity on some of those issues that those projects didn't happen with the fire, got put off. And so this fee waiver would have been wrapped within that as well. And again, since we're a sponsor of the lighting, I wanted to bring the question to the council.
Yeah, so that was my second question is, would this be part of the, like, I think last year, the 19,000? This would come out of, where would this come out of the budget?
Well, I think at this point, if we are looking at, council, it's really up to council. You can do it two ways. We can do it out of the discretionary, or we can look at this as that we're not going to call this a fee waiver. We're going to call it that this really, we're doing a co-event this time, and so therefore we just wouldn't charge the fee. Okay. I guess I'm seeing the way we're doing this event this year, it's really kind of we're linking them so closely. We're taking this event and we purposely put the civic event right before the lighting to really try to leverage resources, et cetera. And so with that, it feels unique. I think if it was a traditional year, Councilmember Cook, it would be a fee waiver that we would be doing out of the discretionary, that pot. But with this, it's really, I feel like we are, this is partly our event at this point. And so we wouldn't charge ourselves an event fee. That was kind of a way to think about it as I muddled through it anyway.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a motion that we waive the fees for the lighting
Second.
ceremony.
Any more discussion? Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. Anything left on this agenda item to discuss? All right. Next up, council members' reports and comments. Anybody have a report and or comment? Mr. Cook.
I just want to go really quick. I went to the WAC TAC meeting, which is the Water Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. Electeds are the WAC and the ones doing the heavy lifting are the TAC. So I just wanted to thank Public Works again. I think that a lot of people don't realize after the fires, everything that we're dealing with, and I do appreciate that And I know that there's a lot of concern out there. The good news is, and it's something that I think that we really need to appreciate with the city of Sonoma and including the Valley of the Moon Water District, knowing that they did not lose pressure during the event. I'm not going to say how close it came, but it's one of those that I think that if you see somebody from the city of Sonoma Public Works or the Valley of the Moon, you might just want to say thank you because you didn't have to boil your water.
Any other comments or reports? Seeing none. City manager, comments and announcements.
Just a few quick items. Just wanted to let the council know and the community know that our first beta project on public art, again, this was an accomplishment this year, and to figure out how we could bring public art to the plaza. And so that is going to be de-installed, for lack of a better term, on November 8th and 9th. So early in the morning, that work will occur. And a lot of good work also being done by Public Works in terms of the West Napa Street Water System Replacement Project. So that will be hopefully continuing through November and finishing up. And also then looking at our whole street rehabilitation project also, that is trying to finish that up before Thanksgiving. Go ahead, please. Let me let the expert speak.
This is information that I learned after the council meeting started, so not to step on any toes here, but the contractor that we are under contract with to complete our street rehabilitation project, which so far has gone out in Avenue Del Oro in the courts and dug trenches to put in the water service part of the project, and then went away with plans to come back. And then there were fires, and that delayed the work. And then I just learned they got a contract to do a bunch of post-fire work, which means drop everything and do this post-fire work. So it affects all their construction projects that they have under contract right now. And so we just learned that, and at this point, we need to finish the conversations with the contractor, but it's a strong possibility that we will negotiate with them to put the neighborhood in good shape for the winter and come back in the spring when it warms up again and pave the street. So we'll see how that all works out, but I didn't want y'all thinking that we're going to wrap that project up within a couple weeks, because right now that is not going to happen.
So just also a reminder, the commission deadlines for both the Groundwater Advisory Committee and Planning Commission have been extended to November 13th. So if there's interest out there, go to our website. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. And at that, we are adjourned.